Hello everybody, my name is Duke Mullis and welcome to my video with the title, What Foul Trouble? And that's right, in question form, this is what foul trouble, with a question mark on the end of it. So I've coached for 30 plus years in the state of Georgia, some small college, mostly high school, a little bit of middle school, and I came up with a strategy the last half of my coaching career that I believe helped my teams to win at least 1 to 2 games a year that otherwise we would not have won. In fact, this strategy, I believe, worked about 80% of the time, 20% not. I'd like to talk about this conventional thinking that coaches have had since the beginning when the game of basketball was invented, called foul trouble. It's our response to it, it's our reaction to it that I would like to hopefully challenge you on, and maybe we can see some changes in our game. So let's talk about conventional thinking. From the time we were players, we saw our coaches do it. When a player got a certain number of fouls in a certain time period of the game, he was subbed out because it was in foul trouble. Now, we carried that on. We became coaches, and we just continued to do what our coaches did in our response to this thing called foul trouble. Now, let me challenge you a little bit. If an outside observer were to come in and watch a number of basketball games, an outside observer who had no previous experience with the game of basketball, they may conclude that the coach has more fear about a player fouling out of the game than he does of losing the game. Now, we know intellectually that's not true, but our actions support otherwise. The irony of it is this: we don't want our player to get in foul trouble, right? We don't want our player to foul out, because if he fouls out, he'll be sitting on the bench in a chair right beside me. So what do we do to keep that from happening? We as coaches take them out of the game and put them in a chair on the bench right beside us. The outcome is the same. It doesn't matter how he got there. We as coaches have been fouling out our own players. The origin, how did I come up with this strategy? Well, I'd like to share 3 examples that went into my thinking. There was one on the high school level, one on the college level, and one on the NBA level. So, high school example, my hometown football school produced years ago a really good basketball team. Now, on this basketball team, they were really a one-man team. They had an exceptional player, had multiple Division I offers. They were riding his coattail all the way to the semifinals of the state tournament. It was basically this really good player with 4 wannabes on the team. He was the team. I was at the game. They're neck and neck with the other team. And somewhere in the second quarter, he picks up his 3rd foul. The coach does what most coaches do. He subbed. That player came out. Well, the other team went on a run. In the second half, this player started and played the entire rest of the game and never fouled out. And they lost the game. And the final margin of loss was the same as the margin was at halftime. It got me wondering, what if? Second example, March Madness rolled around. David Robinson, a future Hall of Famer, was playing for Navy. David Robinson was Navy. He took them all the way to March Madness, and they're about to play a powerhouse at the time, a dynasty, UNLV, with multiple NBA first-round draft choices on their team. In this game, David Robinson picks up his 3rd foul somewhere in the first half. There was 11 minutes left to go in the first half. They were down by 3, 21-18. He gets his 3rd foul. His coach does what most of us do, took David Robinson out of the game. UNLV goes on a run. In the second half, the coach starts David Robinson. He plays the entire second half, never fouls out. They lost by 20. Again, I was wondering, what if? Third example, LeBron James, early in his career, playing with the Cleveland Cavaliers. I'm watching the game on TV. Somewhere in the first half, LeBron picked up his 3rd foul, possibly 4th. They're down by 20. While the coach puts a sub in the game and LeBron walks to the bench, I watched the coach berate the officials for making him take LeBron out of the game, as if he had no choice. Though that's where my thinking began. First with Navy. What makes me think I can beat UNLV without David Robinson? Now let's go to LeBron. If I'm down by 20 with LeBron in the game, what makes me think we're going to win the game without LeBron? Once again, the actions taken by these coaches make it appear that we're more afraid of our player fouling out than we are of losing the game. So I made my mind up. As a coach, I was not going to participate in that kind of strategy anymore. I was going to leave the players in the game. I want to maximize their minutes. I want to maximize their playing time. I want my team, their full force represented in this game. So I had lots of examples, and it started working highly in our favor. But I'll share with you two glaring examples. Now, both of these examples were about 4 or 5 years apart, where I had a starting center. My 5-man happened to be my leading scorer and rebounder. Very valuable to our team. The first example, we're on the road. We're playing a nationally ranked team on their home court. And my leading scorer and rebounder gets his 3rd foul in the first half. I leave him in the game. Worse things happen. He gets his 4th foul in the first half. And you can imagine, I start getting cat calls from the stands. People are second guessing. This coach must be crazy. I start him in the second half. He plays the entire second half, never fouls out of the game, and we won the game. We beat this nationally ranked team on their home court, and that would have never happened had I pulled that player out of the game. 4 or 5 years later, very similar situation. Now we're in a championship game. This leading scorer and rebounder, my starting center, my 5-man, 3rd foul in the first half, I leave him in the game. Plays the entire second half, never fouls out of the game, we win in overtime. We would have never won the game had I pulled him out of the game. So let's talk about why is this? How did this whole fear and this strategy regarding foul trouble come to be? Well, I believe it's human nature. I believe it's human nature that we believe that the end of the game is more important than the present. The players, the coaches, the fans, the media, the end of the game is more important than the present. Now, I hope intellectually we all know that's not true. It's just human nature. You see, a turnover in the first minute of the game impacts the final score just as much as a turnover the last minute of the game. A missed or made basket in the first quarter impacts the final score just as much as a missed or made basket in the fourth quarter. It's just that we remember the fourth quarter. We remember the last minute of the game. It's no more important than the rest of the game. I look back when I was a young child and I was involved with track and field. The same thinking was going on. Let's take the 4x100 relay. The coach would choose the 4 fastest on the team, and they would always put slowest to fastest. That was the order. In the 4x100, your fastest would run the last leg because it seemed more important. Truth is, if all 4 runners run as fast as they can, you could put them in whatever order you want to, and the time should be the same. Now, for all of you track and field gurus out there, I understand. We've come a long way. That's not how it's done anymore. Who's the best starter, who runs the curves the best, and so on. But you get my point here. Now, let's talk about an analogy that I like to use, and I would always use the board in the locker room during preseason with my players. I would go over this strategy long before we played our first game, so that at game time, they would understand that I wasn't winging it. This was not some spontaneous decision that I was making, that I had thought this thing through. So in the preseason, in the locker room, here's the analogy that I would use. I would draw this on the board, and we're going to imagine that that's a cup, and we're going to do an experiment. How many drops of water will cause that cup to overflow? So each mark represents a drop, and we're just pretending we're putting all these drops in the cup to see how many does it take to make it overflow. Let's pretend that the 100th drop makes it overflow. So here's a trick question. The trick question for my players, and now the trick question for you. Which of these drops of water contributed the most to the water overflowing? Human nature says the 100th drop, but that's not true. Without the first drop, the 13th, the 27th, the 48th, this one would not have overflowed. They each contributed just as much to the overflow as the last one. Now, let's talk about some outside research that validates my point. Years ago, a former assistant coach of mine sent me an article. He had found this on ESPN. And they had gathered a group of unathletic-minded mathematicians. They gave them the whole foul trouble response scenario and asked them to crunch their numbers, and conclude one way or the other. Is this a good move on what coaches are doing with foul trouble? They concluded, with the odds and the percentages, that it made 0 sense to take a player out of the game with this thing called foul trouble. Not if we're trying to win the game. It reduced the chances of winning a game. Validated me a little bit, made me feel a little better. So now, let's talk about the pushback. Let's talk about the resistance. What are the arguments against this strategy? Well, some coaches might say, what if my backup player is just as good as the player on the court? Well, then no worries if this guy fouls out. You've got somebody almost as good. Let's turn that around. What if I don't have a very good backup player? Even more reason to leave this player on the court. Now, last one, what if the other team starts going at my player? Offensively, they're trying to foul my player out. Okay? They're trying to draw some fouls and get this guy out of the game. Well, here's been my experience. When high school teams try to do that, it usually backfires on them. It takes them out of their rhythm, out of their offense, and they're trying to do something they probably have not practiced, and I've seen it backfire many, many times. On the college level, a little bit different. They're better at it. Pro level, much better at it. That's something for you to decide for yourself. Now, as a coach, if you choose to go this route, I will tell you, I made this decision, but I had good job security. I had clout in the community, at my school, with the administration. I was somewhat successful, and that confidence led me to go for it. Okay? So I always explain to the players preseason, which I talked about earlier. But also I'd go one step further. I would go to my athletic director and meet with him and show him this strategy. So he was not surprised by it or blown away later in the season. I think you should explain that to anybody who's interested, possibly your administration, maybe even the booster club. I don't know. Anything you can do to put out a comfort level once the season starts, that you're not winging it, it's not spontaneous, this is well thought through. Now, let's talk about during the game. If we decide to implement this strategy, how does that work? Well, number one, with the player, I would always look for a dead ball, a possible timeout, or I may take that player out of the game for a few seconds. And my words were always the same. Keep playing hard, but play smart. Keep playing hard, but play smart. Why is that so important? Well, when I first started to implement this strategy, many of the players would stay on the court and they wouldn't play hard out of fear of fouling out. Well, as you can imagine, that hurt our team. I'd rather have that player on the bench than out there not playing hard. Play hard, but play smart. Also during the game, if we're playing man-to-man defense, I can simply try to reassign this player to a less threatening offensive player. Or we could always go zone. It's easy to hide a player and protect him in a zone. Lastly, let me challenge you. Here is the challenge. Are you willing to implement a strategy that's non-conventional, that will win you at least 1 to 2 more games a year that otherwise you would not have won, to put up with a few more catcalls from the bleachers, some more second guessing, some more critiques? We already have a lot of that as coaches. You're probably going to get a little bit more of that if you have the courage to go through with this strategy. Personally, it was worth it for me. I would like for you as coaches to ponder this idea. I would love to see the pendulum swing from over here to a little bit closer to where I am, maybe somewhere here in the middle. Please ponder this. I hope to see some changes. I wish all of you coaches the best of luck, and thank you for watching my video.